Hey everyone, welcome back to Inland Empire Coaches Talk. Today I have the head football coach for the Poly Bears. John, how's it going? Welcome to the program.
It's good. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
So talk to the folks a little bit at home about you, the Poly Bears program, where'd you come from, and just give us a brief history.
I've had a long and winding road in my career. I grew up in San Diego and coached there for my first 12 years. And then to take my first job, I moved out to Denver and coached there. And then I was very fortunate in 2000 to work for Bear Creek and Tom Thinnell, and we played in our first state championship game against Columbine and Andy Lowry. So that was in 2000. I was very fortunate. It was a great experience. The year before that, the quarterback was a guy named Ricky Ronnie, who was the Penn State OC and just took a head job somewhere. So incredible level of football. And then I got very blessed to get named at DC at Louisville Trinity. And my wife and I of 2 years and our 6-month-old baby Erica moved out to Louisville and was a defensive coordinator there. And then we played in front of a crowd of 36,000 against our rival Louisville Male. Incredible situation. We played and won in the state title. So it was 2 and 2 years in 2 different states, and I was in the right place at the right time. And then after a couple years and being a head coach somewhere else, we had our second child, Emily, and we decided to move back to raise our children in California. And that was in, I think, 2004. And I ended up coaching as a DC at Canyon Springs one year, took over at Eisenhower in 2006 to 2008, met Jeff Steinberg, left there to coach with him at Santiago in 2010 and 11. And then was an assistant at Poly at North for a year. And when Mark Paredes left to go to Damien, was lucky enough to get that job, met some great people. And then I spent 2 years at St. John Bosco. It was unexpected. I wasn't going to coach anymore. I thought probably I was done. And I got called by a friend, Chris King, and was able to go out and work with St. John Bosco in 2016. And ended up beating De La Salle High School, a storied program up there, in the state final, coaching linebackers, helping with the linebackers there for 2 years. So just a great experience. And then I was set, having coached about 27 years, I thought I've had a really great career. I've been really blessed to be in the right place at the right time, and I was ready just to drive out to Bellflower 60 miles a day just to coach at St. John Bosco and be an assistant. It was a great job by them letting me coach and driving out there. So my son was going to be a freshman at Poly, and my daughter Erica had graduated from there, and Emily went there. And my son asked me if I would consider leaving. He just came up and said, "Dad, I wonder if you'd consider leaving just to be one of my position coaches in high school." And so I said, "You don't have to ask me twice." And so I was lucky enough to be asked to be an assistant, and 2 years ago with Coach Derek DeWitt, great guy, and things worked out, and wasn't what I planned, but got offered the head coaching job last year, and so we just finished our first year there and made the playoffs for the first time in 3 years. And so right now I've come full circle. I'm back. I have 2 kids at the school. I get to coach my son. I love in that community. I love being in that community. I'm a few miles away, 3 miles away. And so that's where we're at right now. I'm coaching on Grace and just fortunate to be where I'm at.
Absolutely. I always love hearing people's coaching journeys because, like, talking with Jeff on the program, like how he bounced around, even in the Inland Empire, and then it's like, get closer to home, get closer to home, get closer to home. And the sacrifices that people make for their family, because most people see everyone in the sporting world as it is dog eat dog, and we do put in long grinding hours. But when it comes down to it, if you can make the choice to stay home.
There's something to that, but when we're younger, some of us are driven, and our kids may be younger. Our kids, Jeff's kids and I, it's Jeff Steinberg's kids and I, we coached together, and they were the same age. And at some point in your career, if you're lucky enough, you have the option to come and spend more time with them. And a lot of my career, I moved to 3 different states with my kids and my wife. I was very fortunate and blessed that she was able to do that and was willing to make those sacrifices. So I'm later in my career. It's been 30 years, and then I get the chance to coach real close to home with my son as an assistant a few years ago. And for me, that was fine. I could finish that. my kids drive to school with me in the morning. I'm real lucky. My daughter Emma goes to Gage, and she's going to be in 8th grade, and we all drove together, Emily and John and Emma. So we drove together every day. We came home at night together. So that extra time in the morning meant the world to me. So I got from spending no time with them, driving 2 hours each way to Bosco, getting home at 9 o'clock at night and not seeing them as much as I wanted to being able to be with my family. So that to me was just a blessing, and it's like Jeff, time to be close to home, coach with my kids, and I can't tell you what a fortunate thing that is, because a lot of people don't get that choice.
Mm-hmm. And I think also talking to a lot of the different coaches, the Friday night wins when you're having your family behind you and the community that you see at the grocery store. Like, that's that little bit sweeter than, okay, yeah, I may be at a powerhouse program, but I'm driving that 60 miles.
Yeah. I wouldn't trade. I mean, the time that I spent there was a blessing. It's great. I made great friendships, learned a lot of football. But last year I had Emily on the sideline, and I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, Remember the Titans. And I think we talked about this the other day. There was a coach's daughter who was really with her father a lot and helped. Emily helped us with everything. She was with me on game night. She was taking our defensive calls. She helped us with uniforms. She was a team manager. And I got to spend that time with her, and I got to be with my son, the JV practices with the varsity. And so there were many times I just stood back and said, wow, man, I wouldn't trade this for the world. So I'm very fortunate that I've been able to do that.
Absolutely. So obviously you've gotten to coach all over this country with some amazing men and their styles. What of the pillars of the game have you kind of gleaned from and picked and choose in order to create your style of coaching?
I think one of the best thing I learned is the older I got, really the more humble I had to get if I wanted to grow, because I realized I didn't know as much as I thought. And every time I would go coach for somebody, it was an experience that I could continue to do what I was doing and not learn, or I could say, okay, what do you have to teach me? So there's even some messaging that came to me after I coached with guys like Tom Fennell at Bear Creek. At the time, I didn't understand how important people relationships were. And it was all about X's and O's and out-coaching the other guy. And what I realized is that he put his priority on relationships with kids. And the older I got, and it's only been a few years now that I really understand that the relationship with the kids is most important, what legacy we're going to leave behind. And I didn't get that early in my career. And he used to say to the kids, and I didn't get it at the time, he used to come up to kids and say, you can fight in my foxhole any day. And for people that don't know history, you had to trust the guy to literally have your back, and while you slept, he stood guard for the enemy, and you put your life in their hands. So that's one lesson. It's been a slow progress to the importance of relationships. The next one is to coach on both sides of the ball and be willing to learn both sides of the ball and coach all positions and not necessarily be a coordinator. To be able to move around and say, Coach, I'd like to go coach somewhere else on the team. Will you let me do that? So I've coached, every position on the field, and it was great to learn. It was great to learn from another perspective and be more valuable as an assistant and say, where do you need me to coach? That really helped. So I think coaching on both sides of the ball, which some guys are not willing to do. I mean, it's hard to let go when you're thinking you're an expert on one side of the ball, but for me to be an effective head coach, I really thought early that I could do a better job if I coached on both sides of the ball. So working with some guys that I worked with, just being willing to learn how they did it. And to answer your question in one sentence, I learned there's more than one way to get to the finish line. There are many guys who do things a different way. I don't think there's one right way to do things, but I do think you got to believe in whatever you do and sell it to the kids and be passionate. So that's been the biggest thing, is that to realize that there's more than one way to get things done.
Absolutely. I mean, you see systems all over the place where it doesn't matter if you're talking about a run versus if you're talking about spread and throwing the ball. Like, Jeff's style is extremely different from Rich, who we were talking about off air as well. Like, so, and also getting the personnel and the kids to buy into that system.
And I think you have to sell your staff as well. And that I didn't understand early in my career as well, because one thing about coaches is you have to have some self-confidence and believe in what you're doing. And when you bring a staff together, and these days you don't get to hire a lot of people on staff, and so sometimes it's a necessity to hire people that have been on the staff, that are walk-ons, and they have their own experience. And when you come into a place, they believe when they believe in. So I think part of the job a head coach needs to do is to sell them, to convince them that there's another way to do it. And I tell the staff this all the time: you may have great ideas, let's hear them, but they may not fit with our philosophy at this time or at this game. And so I think early in my career I didn't get that. There were some valid thoughts. I was all about, well, let's do it this way because this is the way that I know and that I trust. And I was less than cordial sometimes when it got into crunch time about why we were doing things. That I think you need to listen to your assistants, give them more input. I've been able to do a better job of that. Giving them some ownership of things, even adapting when we have two different opinions and they'll work equally. If they have some ownership, they're gonna be more effective and be more compassionate and buy into the program. So those things have taken a long time for me to learn.
Absolutely. So now obviously we are sitting in this lovely bubble.
Mm-hmm.
We are physically or socially distanced, depending on how you want to term it. So talk to me about, you're getting ready for spring practice and looking at the new year and planning things out, and then all of a sudden March 13th hits and the bomb is dropped.
Yeah. Well, we had a mantra that we developed basically out of necessity for the staff and the kids last year, which was adapt and overcome. And we're just trying to teach life skills that happen to work in football. And so we had a series of things that were really tough. We got hired in April, I think, of the year before. Mm-hmm. So we didn't get that benefit of 3 or 4 months off where people really get a lot of work done between January, March, and April. February, March, and April, they get a lot of work done. So we were just getting our system put in again that we didn't get the year before. We were meeting with kids. We were out on the field 2 nights a week in January and February. And March 13th hit and we can't do anything. So we thought we were really on the way to having 5 or 6 months to work with the kids, teach the system, build relationships, which is really important for the freshmen that are coming up to be sophomores. Mm-hmm. And we had to find a way to adapt. And so we decided what we were going to do is try to get ahead of the curve on electronic and visual learning. And so right away we got kids on Google Classroom. We got our staff on Google Classroom, which was tough, and Zoom. We had to have the staff buy in. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were hesitant, so we had to sell that and teach them to be efficient. And then we split the kids up into groups on offense and defense and position groups, and then we started meeting with them once a week. We started teaching scheme on Zoom meetings. Sometimes we were just meeting with the kids just to touch base. We would watch video. We would do anything we could. And after 4 months, when we heard we weren't going to play, when that announcement came out, we just gave them 3 weeks off and said, take a break. And I'll give it to the kids. They're resilient, but they want to get out there, and so do the coaches. So I think we've done a good job of keeping in contact with the kids, to me, which is more important. They need to have a connection, and a lot of them are locked up at home, figuratively speaking. And so when you can talk to them and keep contact with them, I think that's going to be a benefit. I think when we get back on the field that we've been in contact and been able to teach some of that stuff is going to be a big benefit.
Absolutely. Now, I was talking to Jeff also about the physicality, and how are you trying to prepare kids now or through the summer and going into the fall for the physicality of football when you can eventually get back to doing 7-on-7s and working?
I think that has to do with organization, because obviously we are prohibited from getting kids together, and also not just the strength aspect, the camaraderie, the team, the culture that you build in the weight room. That's taken away from us. So we started early with giving a workout to the kids, and we would have them every Friday. We'd have them check in. We had a Google Classroom that they had to go to and post and talk about their weight program. So Brandon Alvarez, who used to play, he just graduated from University of Redlands. He's taken over with Ted Telemack, and so they've done a really good job working with the kids. And so but the end is some kids really are disconnected, and you lose contact with them. We did the best job we could. So we just started school last week, so now we have them in our athletic PE periods, and we finally just got out Monday and started our workout. And so we went through a workout program on camera They can't be outside because we can't have a camera on them. And we can say, go do some sprints and do some bounding. But basically, we did a little exercise, and there were kids in a room this size doing their core work. So we have a core element, and we have a flexibility element that we're working on that we can work on in a small area. And there are some kids with their telephones that don't have Wi-Fi, and they're doing the best they can. So the weight part of it, there are some kids that are inviting other kids to work out. But when the gyms are closed as well, open and closed, I think it's kind of tough and it's hit and miss. So I think that's the biggest thing that we'll be missing from kids is overall strength. And I'm hoping we can get out and get the okay from the district and from Riverside County Office and Dr. Kaiser so that we can get out and get back in the weight room. I think there will be a big disparity between some teams that aren't working as much together on that, because a lot of it is going to depend on the kids and their motivation and their staff's connection with them to get the work done.
Absolutely. I mean, talking to some coaches, if you would go to some high school gyms right now, they're completely gutted because kids signed out as much weights as they could and put them in their garage with their parents' permission. And then you have others that are basically working on hotel wads where it's like, okay, here's your 10 by 10 box, and we're going to do a lot of lunges and a lot of air squats and a lot of sit-ups.
Yeah, and I think you got to adapt and overcome it. And there's a way if people want to get ready, and so we're trying to help them to do things that if they had nothing, they could be successful. And so again, core flexibility. And there were a lot of kids who went on their own and gathered on their own at parks and worked out. And there were some 7-on-7 things going on that we had no control about, and some kids would go out and work with them. So there's no substitute for team in a weight room working on a proper program. And again, camaraderie, culture, work ethic, just building bonds, pushing each other, that you can't replace that. So that part I think we're going to miss the most.
Absolutely. But I also think, to go back to your adapt and overcome, the silver lining is for those that do work out at home by themselves, the mental grind of being able to, and the self-discipline will transcend decades from now. Because I loved being in the weight room when I was in high school, when I was in college, and working out with my best friends and the camaraderie. But then when life punches you in the mouth and now you have to be accountable to you with a day-to-day job, and you're like, well, okay, I could just sit at home and just twiddle around and do nothing, or I can go out and attack the day.
100% agreement with you on that. I think there's a lot of players who are motivated on their own, and we saw that when we were in contact. There were kids going out on their own. We just saw them this week, a lot of them for the first time, and a lot of them said, Coach, I was out of it. They didn't have that connection. So what we say is, okay, that's not where you were. We didn't see you, so we need to get to work. And there are other kids who are at another level. I mean, they have worked out on their own. They look really good. And so that whole transfer from skills that you learn in a football program, that transfer to life, one of those is, again, to be able to adapt and have some self-motivation. So no matter how hard we try, for us, football needs to be some internal motivation. Because if you're playing to get motivation from other people, that kind of wears off. Speeches wear off. Halftime speeches, pregame speeches, they wear off. So I'm always about, they got to find their internal why. Why are they doing it? And so we try to stir that and make them think about that. But some kids will be ahead of others, there's no doubt.
Absolutely. So now fast forward to January, God willing. How much is your community and your team just chomping at the bit? And how do you see, or is there anything that you see coming that to now take football that's usually being practiced in 100-degree heat, so we have to adjust the schedule, and also now you're playing where it could be considerably colder than what most Southern Californians are used to. Do you see any challenges in January, and how are you adapting to those challenges?
That's great. That's right, because we've already started, and one of them is for Poly is the field space. So when we started working with the other coaches last summer, they did an awesome job of working together for field space, because we all needed the field. The soccer programs needed the field. The lacrosse field needed the field. So we were always working with each other, and you have to have that spirit of cooperation. It's even going to be doubled and tripled, because we are going to have these sports getting ready for the second season: baseball, soccer, lacrosse, track and field. And on our last, and we talked about this, on our last regular season game before playoffs is in March, and that is the opening night for basketball, the opening night for baseball. So there's going to be a challenge for field space, number one. And for those schools that share athletes, We do have some basketball players, and we have some baseball players. And so if we go to the playoffs, and even if by some disappointing reason we don't, they would leave us in March, and then their first game's that day. So the preparation for that will be hard for them to be ready to go. So there's going to be a challenge for athletes individually that play different sports, for the field space, for the athletic directors who are going to work incredibly hard, the scheduling thing, and we talked about this other day too, the ref crews, the officiating crews that need to be spread out. Is there going to be a shortage on those? So there's a lot of challenges, but one thing I learned about the sporting community and the coaching profession is people will find a way to get it done. And I know this wasn't the best situation, but it's going to force people to work together. And also families are going to make a sacrifice. And I failed to bring this up before, but because we're starting January 8th, the first game is, everybody has to have, I believe, 12 practices before they play. There's the designated number by CIF. So where families usually could take a break and just get out of town and take their families out, the players who want to have enough practice days to scrimmage, and we are scheduled to scrimmage, God willing, on December 30th or 31st, we're going to need to practice during that Christmas break. And I think everybody's going to be in the same boat. I mean, so if families are definitely autonomous, if they want to take their families, they certainly deserve to do that, but there's going to be a choice many of them are going to have to make. If they leave, they'll miss that practice time, and they would be ineligible to play in the scrimmage, which would hurt them when they come back and the team. So another challenge that families are going to have to adapt to, and I think they'll do it willingly. I just wish it wasn't such a choice they had to make between going on break and decompressing and coming back and spending their whole vacation time, practicing to get ready.
Absolutely. I was joking with Commissioner Wygott that my only wish was that we could stagger out a few days for opening day, kind of like baseball does for football, because selfishly I would love to be on the sideline at 4 or 5 of my schools at the same time. I can't do it, but just to hear and have the hair on my arm stand up to know that high school athletics is back, and to hear the community's response to that, especially coming out of, yes, it's going to be challenging for the holiday break, but I think coming out of it, you're going to have this wave of people that are just ready to attack and give hope back to a community that has been starving for it.
I think it's going to be an overwhelming response. I already have gained an appreciation, and our staff talks about it. Just some people take things for granted. So the first time we get to go back together and stand together on the field, hear the Star Spangled Banner and the fans all there, and we're all there together, I think that's going to be fantastic. And when we go to the playoffs, we'll have a playoff schedule that there will be people playing other sports. And so that staggered part didn't happen, and I think part of that was the baseball season's already going to go until in the middle of June, late June. And I think the opposite of that is the kids last year missed the whole season. So I think them being able to adapt to that is a sacrifice that probably needed to be made so that we could fit everything in 2 seasons and not 3, because I think a lot of us were thinking there were going to be 3 seasons.
Yeah, and have 70% of your schedule, 60% of your schedule. Yeah,
and so there was no right way. Rob probably, he knew that he wasn't going to get everybody happy, but he did the best he could, and I think for the most part people just needed a start date. We were all about, we'll do whatever he wants us to do, just give us some direction and we'll adapt and overcome. And so I was just really glad to get that date for emotional reasons, for our kids, for our community and our parents. If they have a start date and they know it's coming, that doubt is gone, and then we can start saying, okay, let's get back to normal for this, whatever normal is for this next season.
Absolutely. So final question, it's always the same for everybody. If you could give one message right now to your players, fans, boosters, community, what would it be?
The message I would give, and I do give my players, is that, and the community, is they're not alone. I mean, the emotional effect that many people have for many different reasons to be told that you're going to have to stay inside. The effect of parents who are struggling to work and having their kids stay home and go to school that are elementary school age, they're not alone. The kids who stay home and who are lonely and dealing with some issues that we have no idea about, they're not alone. And so I think that's what football can do for people. It brings them together. And there are just a lot of people who are struggling. emotionally, mentally, even if it's just missing something they love, they're not alone. So we concentrated on that the last 2 days in our football class was, hey, how are you struggling? And when we talked about was the common things that came up were just the necessity to be together. I don't think we're made to exist at home. We're made to interact with each other, to love each other, to praise each other, and just be in fellowship. So the fellowship part, I think, just hang in there. You're not alone. And this too will pass. I believe that with all my heart. This too will pass. I reject the new normal. I think it's a temporary normal. Mm-hmm. And I have to believe that we're going to overcome this and get back to normal. And so I think it's an important difference between accepting the new normal and not trying to get past it and saying, let's do everything we can to plan for the best and hope for the best. And eventually this too shall pass if we do the right things.
Absolutely. So, John, thank you for being on the program. If anybody would like to be on the program, please reach out. Past that, be safe. God bless.
Thanks for having me.